Welcome to SBC 21's Leadership Forward Lunch and Learn, third Thursday of the month. We are super excited that you all are here to join us. And if you've joined us before, you know the first thing you have to do is tell us what you're eating for lunch. So drop in the chat, tell us what you're eating for lunch. And then some of you have already started. You already know the routine. Tell us where you're watching from. Where are you today? We're excited that you're here. Leadership Forward Lunch and Learns gives us an opportunity to bring you the best and the brightest of webinars, information that will help you to be the best ministry leaders that you can be, as well as help you on your regular jobs and your everyday life. So today we are excited to bring one of my most favorite people in the whole wide world, Reverend Candice Wynn. So today, one of my dearest friends, have you ever met someone that as soon as you met them, they felt like family? Well, this is what happened when I met Candice Wynn. So she is an amazing person, not just because she's my sister, but because she really is. And today she's going to talk about the pivotal role that Next Gen Ministries play in our churches. And so buckle up, get ready, put your listening ears on, and let's hear what she has to say. And so I'm ready. I have my notebook. I'm ready to take some notes, and I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, girl. Grateful for the opportunity to be here with you all. Truly admire the work that SBC 21 does in empowering Black churches. Black churches, that's my heart. I grew up in a Black church. Have served most of my all of my ministry within the Black church. So just grateful to be able to be here with you all today. Today we're going to be talking about building a legacy within your church through your Next Gen Ministries. And you'll hear in a second just why this is so important. But I'm sure that all of you all joined this conversation today for a reason. So I want y'all to hop in the chat for a second and answer this question. Why did you join this webinar today? So just throw in the chat, what are some reasons that got you inspired to hop into this conversation and to be here today? And while you all throw some things out there in the chat, I want to take a second, just let you all know, cue you all in some of the work that I'm doing. I recently, last year, launched a nonprofit. It's a national network for Black churches and leaders. And one of the things that I've noticed through my work and my years of working within youth ministry is just the disparity and the gaps that Black churches experience when it comes to their next gen, their youth ministries. Things are advancing unnecessarily. Within the Next Gen Ministry. So if you are following the Boone community, check out some of the work that we do. Boone is an acronym for Born Out of Necessity. So we are a national network that provides community, strategy, and opportunity for Black churches and leaders, just connecting people, giving them an opportunity to advance within their Next Gen Ministries and also professionally a bit. So I see some people chiming in here, why you joined today. We have a legacy campaign until the end of the year. Okay. Trying to weave the next generation into the life of leadership and ministry of the church. A lifelong learner, love hearing from others. All right. Yep. To grow and to learn. All right, cool. So glad that you all are here. So before we jump in, I want you to do something really quick. And I want you to just reflect. And I want you to think about this morning. When you woke up this morning, think about what that movement, those motions were like for you. Now, whether the Holy Spirit tapped you on the shoulder and you woke up and you didn't want one of them people that needed an alarm clock, or whether the alarm went off and you just wanted to throw it across the room, what were those moments like for you when you first woke up? What did you do? What was one of the first things that you did when you woke up? Did you open your eyes and begrudgingly enter into today? Or did you welcome it? Did you grab your phone and start seeing what kind of notifications you have missed over the course of the night? Did you run to the restroom, wake your children up? Like, what did you do when you first woke up this morning? What did you do when you first woke up this morning? Now, a lot of, again, like Candi said, my background is in Next Gen Ministry within youth ministry. And a lot of adults give teenagers a bad rap for being glued to their cell phones. But the truth is, a lot of adults too are glued to their cell phones. For many people, the first thing they pick up in the morning when they wake up is their cell phone, the first thing they pick up. In fact, 89% of Americans say that they check their cell phone within the first 10 minutes of waking up. And the exact data around bedtime cell phone use is a bit higher. It's not really too consistent, but it is a bit higher. But it's around the same percentage of people saying that their cell phone is the first thing that they pick up in the morning. But how do we get here? How do we get to this place where a cell phone or a communication device has evolved to the first thing that we look at in the morning and the last thing we look at before we go to bed each night, before we go to bed each night? How do we get here? If you look at the evolution of communication, first we start off here in prehistoric times, right? You have smoke signals. That's when people would light fires and have smoke in the air, and they would communicate different things for people long distance. Then you had the pigeon post, and then the printing press. This is the visual era of communication. And then over the years, what happens is we shifted into the wired era. We got telegraphs, telephones, first video phones back in early 1900s, right? And then after that, we shifted into the wireless era, where we have mobile phones, and we got the first cell towers, we get the first emails back in the 90s. And I know some people are like, okay, why is the wireless era supposedly ending in 92? That's because you didn't realize that we are actually in the cloud era. Now, the cloud era is when everything is stored within the cloud. We got HD everything. If you think about a floppy disk and the amount of data and its ability to be saved on a floppy disk could technically today probably save one picture on your phone. We are in an era of the cloud, where the cloud storage is way larger and you have a lot of different social media platforms on mobile devices. This is the age that we're in today. Smoke signals have evolved to the first thing that we look at in the morning and the last thing that we look at before bed. But how did that happen? It happened because innovators are consistently improving. My mouse is doing something weird. It happened because innovators are consistently improving their ability to anticipate and meet the needs of others. Innovators consistently improve their ability to meet people's needs. And over the years, all of these new ideas and inventions, they weren't necessarily immediately adopted, but over time they were adopted. So just look at this for a second. Here's the diffusion of innovation. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with this, but this diffusion of innovation is just a pattern and speed at which new ideas and technology and practices are adopted within people. Some people are eager to innovate. Some people are eager to adopt new ideas. These are the people who are innovators. They jump right on. There's only about 2.5% of people, though, who are eager to hop on and adopt new ideas. But then you have some people who are laggards. Now, laggards are typically a bit slower to adopt newer ideas. And a lot of times laggards only adopt the new idea because the thing that they used to use just doesn't exist anymore. Some people only stopped sending pigeon posts because they couldn't find any pigeons, okay? Today, if you call a business and they ask you to send them a fax, many of us are like, okay, where am I going to find a fax machine, right? Where am I going to find a fax machines? You see, cell phones were adopted more and more because of how they consistently met and improved, because of how they consistently improved in their ability to meet people's needs. If you're bored, what do? You can pick up your cell phone. If you're lonely, what can you do? You can pick up your cell phone. If you have a question about something or need a recipe or looking for advice, or if you're trying to procrastinate, what can you do? You can pick up your cell phone. You can pick up your cell phone. It isn't like that we don't, amen, my Blackberry, yeah. It isn't like that we don't have other things that we could be doing, you know? If we're just curious about something, what do? I pick up my cell phone, you know? This is just how people operate. We gravitate towards the things that meet our needs the most. We're attracted to our phones because of how they seemingly meet the needs that we have within our lives. And notice that word seemingly meet the needs that are within our lives. If we want to attract more children, youth, and families within our church, we have to be willing to do something quite similar. We have to be willing to meet their needs and able to meet the needs in a way that the cell phones don't necessarily do, right? What are the needs of the families? Well, a lot of families that have needs, a lot of the things that are around their needs are pertaining to their kids. They're pertaining to the people who they spend a lot of their time with. A lot of families are focused on trying to raise their children. And if people feel that you're offering something that is of value to them, then they'll consistently show up. So how do we offer something so that children, youth, and families will consistently show up? What does that look like? You see, this conversation today is about establishing a legacy within your church using your next gen ministry. Now, next gen ministry is defined as any grade level ministry or young adult. So you think about elementary schoolers, you think about youth ministries, you think about young adult ministries. You know, some people in their young adult ministries at 29, some people 25, some people go all the way to 40 because people want to hold on to their youth. Amen to them. I ain't mad at it. But when I say next gen ministries, I'm talking about typically your children and youth, and sometimes your young adult ministry. But in order to establish a legacy, here's what we need to do. The cause has to be something that we really care about, and it shows up in our actions. Something that we not just say that we care about, but actually what we really, really care about. It's easy to offer lip service. It's easy to say that we care about something, but not let our footprint and our movement to show it. To establish a legacy, we have to be willing to put intentional and consistent effort in that particular direction. Intentional and consistent effort in that direction. And no, we're not always going to see the benefits and see the fruits instantly, but through that intentional and consistent effort, I believe that God will honor our effort. God will honor the things that we're pouring into. We also have to be clear about the sacrifices that we're willing to make. It's going to cost us something. All things are going to cost us something. It's just a matter of whether we're willing to make the sacrifice, or whether we're willing to pay the price. And also, if we want to establish a legacy, we have to think about how we'll pass the baton. Who will pass the baton on to, and when we'll pass the baton. Sometimes we within the church will hold on to something for a lot longer than we should because we don't want to pass the baton. And all that we're dive into today, I want you all to keep these 4 things in mind, because these responses and the feelings that we have about each of them are likely different for us. And these will be true indicators of how we push forward or how we halt in establishing a legacy within our churches through our next gen ministries. And we're going to get practical in a moment, but I wanted to take a minute to take this approach because I spend a lot of time talking with a lot of churches, and many churches spend a lot of time praying patty cake prayers and doing hopscotch ministry for children and youth. And for some of us, we see where that has taken us. There's way too much at stake for us to not prioritize our younger generations or our churches in that way. It's going to start, if we want to make any kind of change, it's going to start with each of us who are here within this virtual space here. So I talked to some about how we meet the needs of families will determine how we attract families. Let's dive into that a little bit more. In order to meet the needs of people, you have to do 3 things. First, you have to know who you're talking to. Know who in the world you're talking to. We have to understand that the demographics, children, youth, and young adults are 3 different populations. Sometimes we like lumping them together, children and youth together, or just calling them all youth or calling them all kids or something. But they're 3 different populations with 3 very distinct needs. I want y'all to answer this question in the chat for me, please. What is the average age of your church's weekly attendance? If you were to think about all the people who attend your church any given week, what is the average age of your church's weekly attendance? Okay, we got boomers. What else we got? 50, 65, 50. Okay. 50 to 60, 40s. 45, average age of seniors. All right. 20 to 30-year-olds. Okay. 50. All right. 35 to 75. You had a pretty good range there. Okay. Let's look at the generations for a second. 30s to 40s. Okay. We know we know who we're talking to. We respond and we engage a little bit differently. I'm sure many of y'all are familiar with the different generational breakdowns. You see it here. You got the silent generation. They're typically people who are around. Now these ages are they vary. You know, some people like giving a hard date on them, but different sources will say different things when it comes to the actual ages that that make up different generations. So silent generation, you got about 69 plus. Boomers, they're about 59 to about 68. Gen X, around 43 to about 59. Millennials, around 27 to 42. And then you got Gen Z, which is around 11 to 26. And then Gen Alpha is anything under 11 has yet to be born. So Gen Alpha is still a little bit early to really just kind of chime in on who Generation Alpha is and what are the markers that make up this generation, the characteristics of them. You can see some things already, but it's hard to talk about a generation that's not fully born yet. But a note to say about this too, look at this. Compared to boomers, that's those 59 to 68 in the silent generation. So we're talking about people 59 and up. Compared to boomers in the silent generation, Gen Z and millennials are twice as likely to say that they seldomly or never go to church. Gen Z and millennials are twice as likely to say that they seldomly or never go to church. That's people 11 to about 42 years old. Twice as likely compared to boomers in the silent generation. Now just think about that for a second. Think about that for a second. You think about the parents of the children and youth either in your church or that you want to attract to your church are likely millennials or Gen Xers, right? So you think about, remember, millennials and Gen Xers are 27 to about 59. So if millennials are half as likely to go to church as boomers in the silent generation, what does that mean for the children that they're raising? Just let that sit for a second. What does that mean for the children that they're raising? Millennials these days are not just going to go to church out of tradition. You can't force them. You have to attract millennials to go to church. Yes, the good news of Jesus is a reason enough to attract people. But when you think about millennials, they feel they can get their word while cooking breakfast and folding laundry. And it saves them the stress of having to get an entire family up and dressed for church. And they also get to sleep in a little bit later. Let that sit for a second. So as you're trying to attract younger families, or you're trying to attract children and youth and families, we have to be aware of these things, of where people live. What are they thinking about? How connected do they feel within the church? Then second, we have to be aware of what your church is communicating. Be aware of what your church is communicating. What is your church communicating? Let's go back to this diffusion of innovation here. Where do you fall? If you think about new inventions and new ideas and new concepts that come into place within the world, where do you fall when it comes to adopting these new ideas? Are you an innovator where you're like, you are ready to accept something, or are you only accepting something because it's no longer an option to send a fax machine anymore? Send a fax anymore. Where do you lie? And then I want you to think, where does your church lie in all of this? Now, younger people are more likely to adopt new ideas because they honestly haven't seen much else. They have not seen much else. My son earlier, he was in here and he's home from camp today, and he came here and he said something to me about, he says, man, I need to just use Chat GPT. My son is 10 and he knows what Chat GPT is, because this is the world that he's exposed to. He doesn't really know anything else. Younger people are more likely to, let's say that one more time, to adopt new ideas because they honestly have not seen much else. And the brain wiring of younger generations is tremendously determined by their environmental exposure. And a huge environmental exposure has to do with the advancement of technology. Technology is literally rewiring the brains of people because everything is way more accessible, everything is way more instant, If someone goes to your church and they see that you're sending faxes, right? Younger generations will unconsciously say they don't understand me or they can't connect to me because they see that you're speaking a language that they don't understand. Now, I'm not saying that what you need to do is go start changing all of your technology. I'm not saying you need to go and just start getting all the LEDs and get the fog machines and I'm not saying that you need to do a whole tech makeover. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we have to be aware of what our church is communicating. You might think that you know, but different generations have different environmental influences. So therefore, they hear things differently than you might hear things. They see things differently than you might see things. Let me give you an example here. If I say the word, can you dig it, right? Some generations will hear me asking them to go get a shovel and to perform manual labor. Other generations will hear me asking them the question, do you understand? If I say the word dip, some generations will think of nachos, queso, and salsa. Other generations would think that somebody's about to leave. If I say the words, she ate and left no crumbs, some will hear me say that somebody was really, really, really hungry, but other people will hear me say that somebody did a really good job at something. If I say the word tweaking, some people will hear me say that I'm making minor adjustments to something to improve its functioning, but other people will hear me say that someone is overreacting. If I say the word no cap, some will hear me say that I'm not wearing a baseball cap. Other people will hear me say that I'm telling the truth. Different generations hear things differently based on the environmental influences. So we have to be aware of what it is that our churches are communicating to different generations if we want to be able to be welcoming and to be inviting to them. But the question ultimately is, how does your church say that I'm thinking about you? I'm thinking about you in your whole entire self. One of the scriptures has been heavily on my heart lately when it comes to just next gen ministry is this from John 10:10, where it says, the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy, but I have come that they may have life and have it more abundantly. And the piece that I'm holding on to is that abundantly part, right? Now, we oftentimes think about that abundant life that Jesus came to offer, and we think about it solely in the sense of faith and how our churches need to be able to provide faith in abundance, and how God is coming to give us, faith and all these different things pertaining to faith. But the reality is, when we think about an abundant life, it's not just about faith. It's about our economics. It's about us physically. It's about us emotionally. It's about us professionally. It is also about us spiritually, but it's about our entire holistic lives that we don't always tend to within the church. So when you have millennials and you have who are thinking about their families, because if you think about the different waves that generations are taking, you have Gen X, and then you have millennials who are likely the parents of the children and youth that you want to bring. A lot of them are really focused on, how can I advance my children? We are in an era of Black Lives Matter, and we're trying to figure out, how do we advance our children? How do we advance our youth? So parents are trying to figure out how to propel their children into the future in ways that they have not necessarily had before. So if our churches are uniquely positioned to provide exposure for children and youth, in order to give them that abundant life, because we know that exposure expels ignorance. So how are we opening the doors of opportunity for our children, our youth, and maybe even our young adults to be exposed to a broader world in an abundant life and what it really, really means, what God is trying to offer us? Just something for us to think about. What do children, youth, and families experience to know that they're welcomed, their entire selves are welcomed, and that the church cares about not just their faith, but that cares about them in school, cares about even them on the court. A lot of times within churches, we have tensions between extracurricular activities and churches and youth ministries and kids ministries. But the reality is, how can we walk in tandem together and not necessarily be in silo and two different poles working against each other? The next thing we need to do is 3, know the season that you're in. Know the season that you're in. Now, knowing the season that you're in is so incredibly essential, because knowing the season that you're in dictates the way that you move in that season. If you are in a season of looking for children and youth to be attracted to your church, there's no point in developing a weekly program, because you don't necessarily have the relational equity yet. And let's dive into that for a second, right? Let's look at this first though. Ask a question of you all. Are there children and youth connected to your church? Put A if yes, B, some, but they're not too involved, or C, no. Are there children and youth connected to your church? Okay, we got some. Okay, a bit of good mix, a little mix. Okay, got a good little mix, got a little good little mix. That's good, that's good, that's good. Doesn't seem like anyone has responded to with C. Oh, there we go. No. So let me speak directly to you, who, if you don't have children and you connected to your church just yet. In order to attract children and youth to your church, you first have to find out where they are. Where are the children and youth who are closest to your church? And you start close. Why? Because you've yet to build the relational equity and buy-in for people to be willing to freely commute or to come to your church. We like to think that our churches are inviting and they're open and that people freely want to come and are, just are totally accepted. But visiting a church can be quite intimidating if you're not connected to anybody there. When was the last time you really visited a church and you felt not, I don't know. It can be really, really intimidating to visit a church if you're not connected and if you're not necessarily in the ministerial capacity, right? So starting close helps you to go where they are. Where are they already existing? Now, God is telling you to go somewhere else. Now, listen, you got to follow the Holy Spirit, go where God says go, right? But if you start in like a school or a recreation center or a YMCA or a Boys and Girls Club, if you develop relationships with the organizations or the institutions that already have relational equity with the children, the youth, and their families, then by proximity, you in turn can feed off of their relational equity that these organizations have already developed. So if the recreational center already has an after-school program, how can your church partner with the after-school program and feed off of the relational equity that the after-school program has in order to in turn eventually, maybe someday, hypothetically speaking, it might just happen, get the children to in turn come back to your church? When I served at one church, this is actually the church that I served at when I worked with Candi, Cylar. There was a local school not too far from the church. The school was so close, we didn't even have to go through any stoplights to get to the church from the school. There was a Dairy Queen that was right beside the church, right beside the school. And a lot of teenagers would go right from the school to the Dairy Queen after school. So when I discovered this, I took my computer and I just posted up in the Dairy Queen. We'll just hang out there. I would talk to the teenagers when they were getting out of school, just hanging out, doing my work, having casual conversation, not being too intrusive, but just building relationships by being where they already are, right? I never said, hey, come to the youth ministry in the church. Come here, come here, come here, come here. Never did that. I just was present, a present, caring presence. One day, there was a young lady who came and visited the church. She ended up being on the dance team at the school. When she sees me at the church, she says, hey, you that lady that be at the Dairy Queen. And I was like, oh yeah. She discovered that I worked at the church down the street. She in turn went back. When she saw me again, she says to her friends, that's the lady that works at the church. She didn't necessarily have youth pastor language, any of that. That's the lady that works in the church. I developed relationships with a lot of students because I just showed up where they were, in their spaces, offered them love, was authentically who I was and just hanging out with them, and then let somebody else do the lip service. Sometimes we want instantaneous results. We want to say, hey, we did this event. Now everybody's coming back to the church immediately afterwards. It don't always work like that. We have to be willing to play the long game and invest and sow seeds into what could potentially happen within our ministries by just being present where they are. I'm not saying show up and have your church name all over water bottles and telling them to come to this or that service. I'm not saying if you do that, hey, that's you, and I'm not knocking it. But how are we just showing up and loving people where they are? And then, oh man, just being the love of Jesus, showing them the love of Jesus. The next two questions that I want to ask you, the response to them is contingent on where you all lie. So when you know the season that you're in, you're able to navigate what your church needs a little bit differently. So respond to this with the letter A, B, C, or D. The children's ministry in my church, now children, remember, it's preschool and elementary. The children's ministry in my church is A, established, B, it needs to be formalized, C, it needs to be developed, or D, it needs to be revitalized. Okay. Still good with a lot of A and D's. Okay. Established, revitalized, got some developed. Between B and C. Let me define these for a second. So established means that it is functioning and it is going. We have weekly or a couple of times a month programming for our children and our youth, or for in this case, our children. We have things for them. B, it needs to be formalized, meaning maybe we have kids ushering, maybe we have kids who are singing in the choir, maybe we have them who might be doing part of the dance ministry, but they're all separate ministries. They're not necessarily up under one umbrella. They don't come together for anything. Develop means, hey, they're there within the church, but we don't do anything. Revitalize is, we had a heyday a while ago when a bunch of youth was in the church, but we haven't seen it in a while since. Seeing a good mix of where your churches lie. Now let's answer this same question pertaining to your youth ministry. Where does your youth ministry live in this? Now, youth, remember, is middle school and high school, two separate populations. It needs to be revitalized, needs to be developed, needs to be formalized. Okay. Now, if you look at this for a second, the responses that we have for, it looks like for the youth ministry is much different than the responses for the kids ministry. Then the kids ministry had a lot of things that were established, because when you get to youth, you start thinking, oh, hey, it's a lot harder for a parent to drag a teenager out of bed. So a parent may say, no, you can stay home. And they allow that because it's a whole new breed of parenting, right? Than what it once was. A lot of churches will put in place children's ministry for preschoolers in elementaries prior to them putting in place youth ministries, because you can just stay in there and listen to what the adults are talking about. But the reality is, if you're thinking about phased and developmentally appropriate education and faith foundations, then the youth need each other. They need each other. They need something that is uniquely for them. Something for them. Now, you know, again, because everybody is in such unique spaces with no cap, that's funny, yeah. But because the youth are in such different, the youth ministries and the kids ministries and all of our churches, our next gen ministries are in such different places when it comes to churches, our response to this is a little bit different. But I've got a guide that I want to share with you all here. Now, granted, it's a $10 guide, but what it is an ebook that I've developed that helps you to build a personalized strategic plan. Now, it's a step-by-step guide to help you create a 3 to 5 year strategic plan for your next gen ministry. There's several different steps there. It's a long game. It's not necessarily something that it can be done instantaneous. It's not instant oatmeal, instant popcorn. It's not that. It's a process, strategic process that the guide will walk you through with the team to understanding, learning about your church, what's happening inside of your church, to learning about what's happening within the community, to hearing some stories about your church, and to really start diving into and figuring out what does our church uniquely need and how can we get from the current state of where we are to the vision of where God has taken us. Now, a strategic plan is nothing but a guide and roadmap on how to get from where you are to where God has taken the ministry. So check this out. We'll put it in the chat. the link to how you can go online and purchase this if you're interested. It's just a $10 guide. And also, I do also work with churches through the process too, because sometimes we might need a little bit of accountability. We might need someone to help coach us through this process. So if you're interested in developing a strategic plan for your ministry, I'm going to also put my email address in the chat for you to check out too, to walk you through this guide. Another thing that I will say that I offer too is because everybody's church is in much different places, then I also will do a next gen ministry assessment. This will help you to understand what is my church communicating and what do I need to do. The cost of that is 20% off if you use that code SBC21, and I'll walk you through. Can't necessarily put the cost on that one because the cost is contingent upon the number of team members that you have, what it is that you're really looking to do. But I'll walk you through the process of really just dissecting what are the things that your church is communicating, what are the things that your church has going on right now, and how can you better equip your leaders within your church, yourself, in order to speak more clearly to the audience that you really want to attract. Now, I'll say this too, though, some things change over time. They do change, but the reality is too, some things never change. While we have a whole new generation of youth who are coming up, some things don't change, though they might be, much more technologically savvy and use different language and maybe even going back and wearing some clothes of the 90s. Some things don't change. The things that humans crave, like connectivity and community and love, though that doesn't change. That does not change. And that's what the church is. And if we think about what it is that we are able to offer that they cannot get anywhere else, think about those things. Yes, the gospel of Jesus, but also think about how can we build connectivity and community and love, and how can we show up for people? What can we equip our families with in order for parents to thrive, not just today, but also tomorrow? How can we equip our children and our youth to thrive in their faith, not just today, but tomorrow, but also thrive professionally too? I'm going to put in the chat here my email address. So shoot me an email if you're interested in this next gen ministry assessment. Again, the cost of it is really contingent upon your church and what you need. So we can, and also I'm willing to work with churches too, but it's really just contingent upon your church and what it is that you need, what it is that you need. So I'm not gonna throw out a cost. Sorry about that. And I'm also going to put in the chat here the link if you're interested in downloading this next gen ministry strategic plan. I'm putting in the chat the link for that as well. Just give me 1 second. It is my computer's thinking about whether it wants to paste this. All right, I'm going to stop sharing for now. And I'm going to post this in the chat here. And if you all, again, if you have any questions about any of the things that I talked about today, please feel free to shoot me an email. Definitely willing to engage in a conversation about any of this stuff. Children, youth, young adult ministry, it's what I love. It's what I do. Definitely here to be a resource in any way that I can.
Candice, you came on like the Fast and the Furious. It was like bang, bang, bang.
I had a lot to cover, girl. I had a lot to cover.
You shot us up and down with some really good information and some things to think about. And if there's anyone on here that doesn't work in youth ministry, you can take the same concepts, the same questions, and ask yourself about your ministry. Candice, would you mind telling the people more about Boone and where you're going to be coming up soon?
Okay, yep. So last year I launched a national network called Boone. Boone is an acronym for Born Out of Necessity. Now, a Boone is defined as a thing that's useful and beneficial, but beyond that, it is our acronym for Born Out of Necessity, and it is a national network for Black children and youth ministry leaders. Now, the reason why I've launched it is I've been in youth ministry for, I guess, coming up on the past 20 years. And over the years, just seeing the lack of diversity within the next gen space, we go to different conferences, you're part of different continuing education, programs, kind of the same reason why SBC 21 exists within the United Methodist Church, because there's something that our churches uniquely need that don't necessarily get through other places. So Boone provides community so just connecting people on a national level, community for people, providing a strategy. We have a monthly podcast where my co-host and I just talk about different issues pertaining to next gen ministry within Black churches, whether it be through, hey, we're tired of bake sales. How can we get some real funding for our ministries, right? Or whether we're talking about how to get senior leader buy-in or merging the gap between different grade levels. We're coming up on next month, we're putting out an episode talking about the importance of having a team. So just having different conversations on the strategy section. And then also probably within October, we're going to be launching our Speakers Bureau and our staffing agency. And the goal of the Speakers Bureau and the staffing agency is solely to be able to give people opportunities, connect opportunity with talent. We're gearing up for tomorrow. I'm actually heading to South Carolina to be with AMEs to have a similar conversation within their Christian education conference. But the week after, I'll be heading up to DC, and it'll be our first stop on a 6-city listening tour. A 6-city listening tour, and the listening tour that we're doing is going to be answering the question of, hey, we say that Black churches need something different. What is that different thing that Black churches need for their next gen ministries? And the goal of that is to build our strategic plan for our next gen ministry, for our Boom, but also to be a better advocate for Black churches on a national level. So we'll be in Atlanta, Birmingham. If y'all are in any of these cities, check it out. I'll put it in the chat too. We'll be in Atlanta, Birmingham, Houston, Inglewood, Chicago, and DC between end of July through end of September.
Any questions you all have, feel free to drop them in the chat, or you can drop them in the Q&A section. And while you're thinking of questions, my question back to you is, if they want to drop into one of the listening sessions, can they still sign up?
Yeah, so yeah, definitely. So we'll be we're kicking off again, like I said, next weekend. I'm putting in the chat right now the link to the listening to our website. Somebody check that, make sure I got it right.
And that shows all the upcoming cities and how they can sign up.
Mm-hmm.
What can they expect from the listening tour?
Yeah, small group conversation. So the goal is, and this is not some people have never heard of listening tour before. So they're like, what is it, a conference? Is it a training? It's not a conference, it's not a training. It's really just like small group conversation, bringing people together. So we're bringing together leaders in different cities, and we're also inviting them to bring teenagers with them, because far too often within organizations or within ministries, we plan for young people, we don't invite them to the table of conversation to really speak life into what it is that we're saying, to be able to say, nah, that ain't right, or yeah, that's right. So we're inviting people who come to bring a teenager with them also. So we're going to have small group conversations, answering a few questions. We're asking the same questions in every city because it is our approach at gaining some qualitative data. Because after we come off of the listening tour, we're going to be putting out a survey in order to get some quantitative data. If you look at Black church children and youth ministries, there's not a lot of data that exists out there. The data that exists out there is primarily pertaining to, white churches and the things that they experience. So this is, honestly, it's something, I don't know that anything has ever happened like this. We're working to gain just some data, some knowledge and understanding about what's happening within Black churches. So we're providing some community with each other so you can connect with other people within your local area. So if you have no connections with people who are within your local areas who are doing the work that you are doing, it's a great place to show up. If you're looking to just talk with other like-minded individuals about the different things that you're experiencing within ministry, it's a great place to show up.
And if you're not in one of those areas, you can always tell a friend, and then they can tell you about it.
Spread the word.
Yeah, tell a friend.
Mm-hmm.
What are other ways that they can follow you, your schedule? Is everything on your website? What about social media, Facebook?
Yeah, so if you follow me, don't follow me. I'm a boring follow. All I post is my kids, and that's about it. But if you want to
follow Boom,
they can follow Boom. So if you want to follow Boom, I'm going to put in the chat here what our that's for Instagram. And then also, just if you go to our website, the Boone Community, I'll put the website in there again. If you go to our website, thebooncommunity.com, then you'll be able to see how to follow us. I mean, our national network, we connect via Facebook. And understanding technology, hey, Facebook has a certain age limit on it. Certain generations, it's just not on Facebook like that. But we have a Facebook group where I post different things that I hear about. Other people post different things that they hear about. So Facebook group is a great place to be connected. Following us also on social media, checking out our podcast. New episode will drop next month about the importance of building a team. So yeah, just check us out online.
Yeah, I agree with Jacqueline says. Thank you so much for enlightening us. You always do. And we need more conversations like this. I hope that more people will have the opportunity to view this later. We will host it on our YouTube channel as well. She says, Candice, thank you for the insightful information. When you talked about people staying home with family on Sunday rather than going to the actual church location, how do we get them to transition back into the physical building? That's an excellent question.
It is, and it's about meeting, they're going back to that conversation of meeting people's needs. How are we meeting people's needs in a way that they cannot get anywhere else, right? Through relationships, people have an opportunity to really start dialing back in, because people got comfortable being at home under COVID. People got real comfortable being home on Sunday and watching church virtually, but there's something about that community that people are able to build within churches that can enable them, equip them, and maybe even give them that urge to want to show up. So, I mean, just wondering, what is your church doing to build community and connectivity between people who are showing up, and how are you being intentional about that? Some of it is, of course, contextualize different places. It might look different within one church versus another, but a huge part of it is, what can the churches offer that people can't get anywhere else? And if you answer that question of what your church can offer that they can't get anyone else, then you get a step closer, but authentic relationships. A lot of times, a lot of churches, this is going to be a hard pill to swallow for some churches. So don't cancel me when I say this, but a lot of churches realize the lack of relational equity that they have with some people within their churches amid COVID. Because when people stop showing up to churches, after COVID, it's a huge part because they didn't necessarily really have the relational equity prior to COVID. So if you don't really have strong relationships for some people to come back, I think that the gospel message, the gospel message is definitely something that is strong, but people are feeling like they can get that at home. They're not necessarily seeing the value and the benefit of the church speaking to the whole self, going back to that abundant life. How are we speaking to the whole self and the whole person that people are? Financially, how are we helping people with their finances, right? Professionally, how are we helping people advance professionally? Physically, what are we doing with that too? Just speaking to the whole self and offering things for the whole person and not just pertaining to faith. And still that community angle too.
That's good. That's good. One last question from me. How do you ascribe to investing in the aesthetics of your youth and children ministry? And I use that as an example because my niece, who of course we're the same color, we visited another church, and aesthetically they had everything broken down, very neat, different rooms you could transition into. But she gravitated to that church versus her own church, mainly because of the aesthetics, not because of the word that was being taught, but she felt better. She said she learned better in that atmosphere. How do you subscribe to that?
Yeah, it could, learning, I think when we become adults, we forget that everybody still has different learning styles, right? And so it sounds like she connects with the visual aspect of learning and engaging, right? But then you also think about I talked a little bit about this too, we have an entirely different generation of children and youth whose brains are being wired differently because of what they're being exposed to. If you look at, I was talking to my daughter yesterday about this. She's only 8. We had some deep conversations. If you look at a lot of the YouTube shorts that people watch, right? A lot of the content that children and even teenagers consume is rapid fire content, right? It's 30 seconds. Quick, 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 quick. So therefore their brain need that TikTok generation. Yep, absolutely right. Their brain needs that stimulation in order to, it need that kind of activity to feel stimulated. So it's about how the brains have been rewired and how they receive stimulation. And they need that. And so when you think about a slower pace or a slower show, then, you know, hey, it might be like, man, this is boring. So what you end up having is you have a lot of children who might be misdiagnosed as ADHD, but because of their way the environment has shaped their wiring of their brain, not necessarily because of development. There's some children who might be diagnosed as ADHD because of developmental things, but there's also the ways that the environment has shaped them too. So some churches, sometimes these churches don't always look like ours. Let's just be real. Some churches have a little bit of a longer budget and they can put the Ferris wheels in the middle of the kids' room, right? They can put the water slides in the hallway. And our churches don't always haven't necessarily invested and prioritized children and youth ministry financially in a way. We'll put more money towards our praise team,
Pastor's anniversary.
Ministry. Anniversary. There was some children and youth ministries, and then you have these large churches that have we have these large churches that have volunteer youth pastors that don't want to invest in a salary. Right. Volunteer children's pastor, you don't want to invest in a salary, right? But when you invest in someone's salary, that's a seed that you're planting into that church and that ministry and into that future, right? So, and you have the ability to do more. So speaking back to Callie and her stimulations, that's just the generation and the things that they're stimulated by, they're attracted to because of the ways that they are wired. I mean, of course, listen, I like going to a place that kind of like stimulates me, but then I get to a certain point, okay, I'm overstimulated, I gotta go, right? One last point that I'll make, sometimes our churches try to replicate Disney World and we fail. And when we try to replicate Disney World, we try to imitate something that's not authentically who we are and what we have the ability to do. So then it starts looking real low budget and people are disinterested. So what we really need to do is figure, okay, how can we lean into the things that we uniquely can lean into, and how can we give them the things that we can uniquely give them that they can't get anywhere else? Some of the best ministries that I've done, were the ministries that I feel like I was a part of, were the ministries when I was sitting in the church basement in cold metal chairs. Not when I had the lights, not when we had the fog, not when we had all the designs. It was when we were sitting in the basement in cold metal chair because of the authentic relationship that was able to be developed there.
Okay. Opposite of what I was thinking, but good stuff. Okay, one last question before we wrap. Brittany says, do you have any advice for ministries that struggle to get volunteers for their children and youth ministries?
Yeah, I think it's about presentation. Sometimes we go to people and we're like, man, you want to volunteer with the kids? I know it might not be appealing, but if you approach it as an opportunity, because it really is an opportunity, and when you frame your ask around, hey, this is an opportunity to speak life into the future and continue to keep the future of our faith going, right? Then the way that our minds, the way that we understand the ask in our minds kind of comes out whether we realize it or not. So how do we understand what we're asking somebody to do and how appealing do we think it is, right? And then also it's about vision casting. How are you casting a vision of what it is that you're asking them to do? Are you just asking them to sit and just stare at somebody? Or are you giving them meaningful work? Because, children, teenagers, adults, we like to be a part of things that are meaningful, things that are impactful. So how are we vision casting the opportunities that they can be a part of, and how are we even visioning for the ministry and giving people an opportunity to be a part of things that are great? But you're not wrong, Brittany. All churches are struggling with volunteerism. That ain't nothing new. That's been around since 1812, even before that, right?
So very true. So very true. Thank you so much, Candice Wynn, Reverend Candice Wynn, for joining us today and dropping this bomb on us. We hope that you will take advantage of the offerings that she shared with us today. Again, feel free to share this information. It will be posted on our YouTube channel, which is Strengthening the Black Church for the 21st Century. Will be shared by Tuesday, and you'll be able to bounce it around and share it with your leadership. It's been fabulous again. I appreciate
Thanks for having me. It's good to be
You're
here.
welcome. On behalf of SBC 21 and our National Executive Director, Dr. Micah Boyd, we want to say thank you. And you all have a great day.